Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll take a few more minutes to allow others to log on, and then we'll get things started.
Well, greetings. It is indeed my pleasure to welcome you all to our 35th webinar in the Coffee With series hosted by the Greenleaf Center for Servant Leadership at Seton Hall University. I'm Reggie Lewis, Executive Director of the Greenleaf Center, and it's great to greet all of you who've logged on today to take part in our conversation with the Dr. Ellen Censky, an amazing servant leader whose mark on the world will be felt for many generations to come. In a moment, I'll give a more formal intro of Dr. Censky, but first, a word about our webinar series and the center. The Coffee With series provides the center the chance to showcase the inspirational stories of servant leaders and the endless ways in which individuals, organizations, and society in general can be transformed by the power of servant leadership, a philosophy in which the leader first seeks to serve. And I assure you that Dr. Censky will not disappoint us today. For over 60 years, the Greenleaf Center has worked to promote the awareness, understanding, and practice of servant leadership. In addition to the Coffee With series, other core programs include the Greenleaf Scholars Program, which funds researchers whose work promotes the efficacy and impact of servant leadership. Our virtual courses on the everyday principles of servant leadership, and through our outside engagements, we proudly work closely with organizational partners as they implement the practice of servant leadership throughout the workplace, or I should say, their workplace culture. Before a proper introduction of our guests, I'd be remiss in not acknowledging the generous sponsors of the Greenleaf Center's 2026 Coffee With webinar series, including PSEG, SAM, or Service Access and Management Inc., and CSG Law. Thank you, thank you, thank you to all of our friends among our sponsors. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for. It is truly an honor to welcome today's guest, Dr. Ellen Censky. A Wisconsin native, Dr. Censky has served natural history museums across the United States for decades. working her way up through various roles from penny insects to collections manager to head curator, chair of life sciences, and ultimately assuming the helm of the prestigious Milwaukee Public Museum. Ellen, you've got to help me understand how you pen insects, but we'll get into that. As president and CEO, Dr. Censky is currently leading the charge on the largest cultural undertaking in Wisconsin's history, a once in a generation project unlike any other in the nation. And all of you tuned in here will get a sense of this in a minute. Dr. Censky holds a Bachelor of Science in Zoology from the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and a doctorate in Biological Sciences from the University of Pittsburgh. And most recently, in 2025, Dr. Censky was inducted into the Greenleaf Center's Servant Leader Hall of Fame as an extraordinary exemplar who embodies the essence of servant leadership in all that she does, an honor so well deserved. So, Dr. Censky, are you ready to dive in? Have you got some good old strong Wisconsin coffee brewing on that end? It's so good to see you. Now, before I forget, Gabby would have me to remind the audience, you all will have a chance to engage in our Q&A feature after my first segment with Dr. Censky. So get ready and start loading up your questions in our Zoom Q&A feature. Ellen, on this cold Thursday. We'll begin with getting a sense about you. So, you grew up in Cedarburg, Wisconsin. Did I say that properly? Cedarburg?
You did.
Um, where is Cedarburg in proximity to Milwaukee? And more interestingly, what are some of the fondest memories you have growing up there?
So Cedarburg is about 30 minutes north of downtown Milwaukee, if the traffic's fine. So, um, and frankly, now with the interstate between Milwaukee and Cedarburg has been under construction for the last couple of years. So it could be an hour north. Um, but small town, and when I grew up, it was even smaller. But it's one of those almost like a Norman Rockwell kind of town
Okay.
where it's a beautiful downtown, a great community, and it was just amazing growing up there because of my family. So I come from a very large family. I have six brothers and
Wow.
one sister. And we didn't have a lot of money when we were growing up. So so most of my fondest memories are, of course, playing with my siblings, especially, my sister was 5 years older, so it's mostly my brothers. But it was mostly outside in the woods, discovering nature in the woods. And so I just have this passion for being outside and in the woods. And I know I've read so much about how that really, when you can be out in nature, it really centers you and brings you back to who you are. And so I so that's where my fondest memories are, watching my uncle owned some property outside about 6 miles out of Cedarburg. And I can remember riding our bikes out there, and it was just a wonderland of the natural world where we could explore and see baby foxes
Okay.
and catch frogs. And so
Okay.
so those are really my fondest memories.
Okay, and I would imagine learning something about some insects as well.
Yep.
You're a nationally recognized leader in the world of curating, and you served in leadership capacities at the Carnegie Museum of Natural History in Pittsburgh, the Connecticut State Museum of Natural History, the Sam Noble Oklahoma Museum of Natural History, and now at the prestigious Milwaukee Public Museum. Help our audience to understand how your education, your training, and background in zoology and biological sciences has served you well throughout your distinguished career?
Well, if you think about the names of all those museums, they were all natural history museums. And natural history museums, all of them have biological departments that where they are doing research and preserving specimens and even collecting them. And so, when I started into museums, and honestly, I never, prior to actually getting my first job in a museum, which I'll talk about in a minute, I never even thought of museums as a potential for a career opportunity because it just wasn't even on my radar that there was something going on behind the scenes in a museum.
Mhm.
And but nearly 50 years ago, so back in 1977, so I was a student at UWM undergrad, and I got a job working on a research project at the Milwaukee Public Museum.
Mm.
So I was hired by one of the curators of entomology, so insects, who was doing research on beetles. And he needed somebody, he had collected all these thousands and tens of thousands of beetles. And in order to study them, he needed them prepped, which was pinning them up. And so my job was to pin beetles. So it's really just what it says. You put
Okay.
a pin through it, it dries, and now you can study it. So
Wow.
so that was my first job. And as you noted in my introduction, I have worked in many different roles in museums, each, starting out in the lowest and then gradually working my way all the way up to becoming the president of a museum. And I think what having that those many different experiences right in museums really helps me to understand how a museum works because I've been in so many different positions. But it also helps me to understand when you're making decisions, there are people that are impacted by those decisions. And so I'm reminded just to keep them in mind as we're making these decisions because they end up being the ones implementing them.
Mm.
And so that is having the vast number of positions I was in. That helps me. And then having that science background where, you learn that scientific method, you learn critical thinking, that really helps me to analyze situations to make sure that I've really pick things apart before you put them all together to make that decision. So I think it really has helped in helping me as a leader. And I think the other thing that I discovered when I stepped into my first role in leadership
Mhm.
was that, I really love bringing people together
Mhm.
to do something that's bigger than what they can do separately. And I think that's a lot of what leadership is bringing the right people to the table to explore what we can do together.
It's certainly what servant leadership is all about and what all leadership should be about. And I also love your earlier comment about making decisions with people in mind and how it will impact upon those that you're serving. Um, that's a nice segue into our second category, which allows us to get a better sense of how you've been tying both nature and culture together. So you're at the helm of what has been described without exaggeration as a once in a generation project, unlike any other in the nation. So since 2018, a little context for our audience, since 2018. Ellen and her colleagues have been diligently working to reimagine the Milwaukee Public Museum as the new Nature and Culture Museum of Wisconsin to open in 2027. But Ellen, before we get into some of the project specifics, I gotta ask, why the change in the name? What's in the name?
Yeah, there's several reasons for that change. We are right now in our 144th year of existence, so we've been around a long time.
Okay.
And but for a
That's a
hundred,
lot of history.
it is. For 110 years of that existence, the first 110 years, we were initially part of the city. So we were started as a city museum. And then in 1976, the city sold us to the county. We were a county museum. But in 1992, the county and the museum came to the realization that the best course forward for both the county and the museum would be for the museum to separate from the county, to become a separate 501(c)(3), so that we could raise significant funds for our operations because the county just didn't have the resources to support us at the level it should. So, so we separated from the county. We still exist in a county building, and the county still owns the collections, but MPM is a separate entity. So up until we separated from the county, public made perfect sense because public implies we are part of your tax dollars go to support our entire operations. The new museum will have only 6% of our support from
Huh?
the government. So we felt that it was time to take public out because it's very confusing for the community because it does imply we are still part of the government. Public also doesn't tell you what kind of museum we are. So if you were to walk down the street and ask 10 different people in Milwaukee, what kind of museum are we? You'd probably get close to 10 different answers, and it would probably be based on their favorite exhibit.
Okay.
So public really doesn't tell you what kind, but our collections, so we have 4 million objects that we care for. 3
Did you say
million of
four?
those,
You said 4
4
million?
million,
Wow.
4 million. 3 million of those are natural history items. So birds and mammals and insects and fossils and plants, and 1 million are cultural objects.
Hmm.
And so in those cultural objects, as well as the natural history objects, come from not only Wisconsin, but around the world. And so we thought, well, why not just tell people what kind of museum we are? We're a museum of nature and culture. And then finally, the Museum of Wisconsin, it's Nature and Culture Museum of Wisconsin. Museum of Wisconsin says, we serve this entire state. We have people who visit from the entire state. We have collections from across the state. So we really want to embrace that we are Wisconsin's museum.
Absolutely. Wow. Fascinating. Fascinating. And the building's opening now, just a little over from a year from now, will serve, of course, as the culmination of 9 hard years to bring this project for the people of Wisconsin to fruition. But you didn't break ground until 2024. Um, Tell us why it was so important to spend so much time on the planning and conceptualization than on the actual construction of the new facility.
Sure. So, it actually is more than 9 years because this actually started before I became president.
Wow.
It started way back in 2015 and 16 when we did a couple of studies. One was to determine the building that we're in is in disrepair. It's got about 100 million in deferred maintenance.
Wow.
And so we did a study to determine should we stay in the building and repair it, or should we build new? We also did a study on what would donors support. And it became clear that we could not stay in the building because donors would not support putting that kind of funding into a county-owned building, and the county didn't have the funds to bring it up to museum standards, and actually not just up to building standards, I should say. So That's what set us off on that course towards a new museum. Now, all building projects have a few years of the whole design, both the conceptual and then the architectural designs and everything. But what we are is more than just a building. We have to fill those 5 floors with exhibits. And we knew that we would not be able to just pick up and move the current exhibits because the way MPM builds them, our style is to create these immersive environments. And much of those elements of the exhibits are just built into the building. So it would be vastly expensive. There are beautiful dioramas that are up to 100 feet long,
Wow.
and they're painted on 3-inch thick plaster that has asbestos in it. So, you can't just pick up and move them. So we took the opportunity to re-envision the exhibits. And of course, when we re-envision, we go back to our collections and we say, okay, what do the collections tell us? And we have natural history collections, we have cultural. So we wanted to bring those together and tell the stories of the interconnectedness of the natural world and the cultural world. Interestingly, when I went back and looked at when this building that I'm sitting in right now was built, the then president of the museum, I was reading through his vision and I came across this statement where he said that this would be a museum unlike other museums, and it would tell the stories at the intersection of ecology, which was a brand new word at that time, back in the early 60s, and civilization. And it's like, oh, okay, so nothing is new. So we are really carrying on that tradition of who we are in this building. And, we know that in that new building, we need to retain that immersive experience because that is what our visitors have come to love. That's what they told us they love about this museum. But we also knew that we needed to infuse more technology into the new museum because that's what kids today expect. Now, I'm going to qualify when I use the word technology. It doesn't mean a bunch of screens. It's actually, when we say technology, I love our exhibit designers. They say technology means magic. So it creates these environments that are magical through the sounds, through the visuals. And then we will have interactives that will give you more content. So, maps where you can dig deeper into Milwaukee, or books where it's a visual, you turn the page and all of a sudden you've got new content. So we will have those kinds of things. But all of that takes a lot of time to plan.
Absolutely. So exciting. And I can't wait to have my own personal immersive experience soon, Ellen. It is an exciting new home that you and all of Wisconsinites, if I'm saying it right, are getting. Here we have noted a new outdoor rooftop terrace for some cocktail hours, perhaps. A butterfly vivarium, you're going to have to talk about that. A cafe, classrooms, planetarium, several floors of exhibit galleries, and 5 permanent exhibits. I want to ask about 2 of those permanent exhibits, but you got to tell me about this butterfly vivarium. So, what the heck is that?
So that is a room where we have live butterflies. So you can go in and experience butterflies that are flying around you. And it's something that we have currently in this museum, and it is one of the most popular exhibits, especially for kids. And so it is coming with us. And I will tell you that, Milwaukee Public Museum it's been innovative throughout its history. And one of those innovations where we were the very first museum in the country to have live butterflies in an exhibit. So there are butterfly vivariums all over the country, and we were the first ones to do that.
Look at that. All right. Um, Tell us about two of these permanent exhibits, the Milwaukee Revealed and the Wisconsin Journey.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting that you chose those two exhibits because one of them is uh the Milwaukee Revealed is a spiritual successor to an exhibit that we currently have. And the other one is an exhibit that is unlike anything that we have. So you've kind of chosen the two exhibits that are on both sides of that continuum. So Milwaukee Revealed, as I said, we are considering it the spiritual successor to the Streets of Old Milwaukee. If you are not in Milwaukee or Wisconsin, you may not know what is the Streets of Old Milwaukee.
Mm.
It is an immersive environment where we take you back in time to what Milwaukee, an idealized vision of what Milwaukee was around the turn of the 20th century. So it covers from 1898 to 1995, and it recognizes some of the businesses that were here at that time. It's got a candy store. That you actually can buy old-fashioned candy in.
Okay.
It's got a home. But it's this environment where you feel like you're being transported back in time. And so it is one of the Streets of Old Milwaukee, Dinosaurs and Butterflies are the top three exhibits when you ask people, what do you like about MPM? So we knew we had to carry forward some version of that. And what we are doing is something very similar to what we have now. It is um, a immersive environment walk through streets that allows you to experience what Milwaukee was like in the past. But what we've done is we've enhanced it a little bit more in that you no longer are just looking into buildings. You can go into some of those buildings. We no longer are restricted in time period. We've got different ages of buildings in this so that we can actually tell much more of Milwaukee's history. Some of the kinds of things that will be in this will have a beer hall, and we'll talk about beer and why beer here. Well, that's a nature culture story. It's because of the amazing Lake Michigan and fresh water, the amazingly fertile soils in Wisconsin, and immigrants who came with their recipes. We'll talk about the founders of Milwaukee, Solomon Juneau and his wife Josette, who was Native American.
Okay.
We will talk about we'll have a pharmacy, and we'll talk about medicine, which is again, and the Cream City pharmacists, which were the first Black Cream City Medical Society, the first Black medical society in Milwaukee way back in the 30s. So, and they're still around today. So we'll share, but medicine is nature culture. That's where our medicines come from. So what we are doing is creating that similar environment, but actually giving you more about Milwaukee. Wisconsin Journey is an exhibit that takes you across Wisconsin. And we know there are so many kids in this community that never get outside this community. And we want to share Wisconsin with them. We also know that we are getting more and more visitors from outside of Wisconsin into Wisconsin. And so we want to share all that Wisconsin has to offer. So we'll take you over to the driftless area where you've got these amazing rock outcroppings. We'll take you through the prairies. We'll take you all the way up to the Apostle Islands and the Great Lakes, and we'll take you through the North Woods where everybody goes to vacation. So we'll take you all around Wisconsin. And the other thing we're doing in the Wisconsin Gallery is we have been working with Wisconsin tribes to infuse their stories throughout Wisconsin. And so they've been helping us to choose the objects that we will put on display and to tell the stories So we are really creating and making sure that the Native American story is part of the story of Wisconsin.
Oh, fantastic. And that would include them loaning artifacts to the museum as well.
So we care for a very large collection of Native American materials, and so they are choosing what they want to put on display.
Love it. Fantastic. And then, of course, we can't leave this part of the interview without asking something about that unique architecture and the materials used in the design of the building. If you could say more about what inspired the museum's exterior design and even something about the interior that deserves some mentioning. Look at Gabby, found a nice shot of the new facility. Okay, Ellen.
So
Thanks,
this
Gabby.
Yeah, that's great. So the design was inspired by Mill Bluff State Park, and the bluffs that are out to the in the Driftless area to the west of us. They're just such a unique structures. And when you drive on I-90, you drive right past them, and so you see them, and they're just these amazing structures. And when you look at some of the renderings that the architects did when we were at that site, they look just like the building. So it is, and the other thing is that it is these, in order to shape the building, it's concrete panels. It's like there's 300 big panels and weighing as much as 300 or 50,000 pounds. Um, that there are 300 in them and another 300 caps on tops of ledges and stuff. But those are made right out of Wisconsin resources. So a town just to the west of Milwaukee is called Germantown, and they have this huge precast panel. In fact, my understanding is that the two top precast panel manufacturers in the country are right here in Germantown.
Look at that.
So they produce the panels from molds, and they're produced out of the materials come out of the quarries right in this region.
Mm.
So it is truly being built of Wisconsin materials. Um, and then inside, just like with the bluffs, the bluffs come up, but there are crevices that run all the way through the bluffs that bring light down to the bottom. And so inside, we actually will have a light well that comes from 5 stories up and brings light down to the ground floor. And it's a pretty impressive, amazing structure. It's like a piece of art.
Wow.
So there also will be this monumental staircase that winds up through the whole center of the building. So it's just an impressive looking building.
Obviously. Look at that. Oh gosh, I'm being pushed by my team here to hurry up to get us to the last segment, but we are at our last segment. I could talk with you, Ellen, obviously all day. Our final segment, however, is about something that you do as a natural course of your work, and that's, bringing a lot of people together. And the great thing about your work, Ellen, is that the project, I think it brings us so much hope during such a difficult time in American society today, a period in which we are unfortunately way too divided. But you've leveraged this work to build community, establish common ground, and preserve and celebrate a shared history. Talk to us now about how you methodically organize town halls and listening sessions that led to thousands of people contributing to the museum's vision and content.
Yeah, well, so one of our goals throughout this was to make sure that we heard from the community. And so throughout the process, we have been engaging with community members, from teachers, from neighborhood associations, artists, other museums, individuals. And from the beginning, when we were setting the vision, we went out and said, "What are your thoughts?" When we were setting the themes for the exhibits, to the storylines, and even the building itself. We had 3 different designs we were presented with, and we took that out and said, "What are your thoughts?" So as you said, we did that through town halls, through listening sessions. I was the county supervisors had their own sessions, and I went and answered questions at a couple of those. We did surveys where we asked, when you think of Milwaukee, what comes to mind? When you think of Wisconsin, and those got incorporated into the exhibits. We also, as I said, we've been working with the tribes across Wisconsin to make sure that we've included their stories from their perspectives. We also have a gallery that's focused on the world and world cultures, and we've been reaching out to, we have collections from across the world, and we chose to exhibit those where we have the strongest and deepest numbers of collections. And we reached out to those source communities to, one, have them look at the collections and tell us what it is, should we be displaying it or not, and then what are the stories we can tell. And so we have a network of hundreds of people across the world, from the Ainu in Japan to Icoma in Africa to Quechua in Bolivia to, we've been reaching out to get input on what are the stories we should tell and how we should tell them. We've listened to people's concerns, and the vast majority of them, when they hear the details of the project, they get really excited about it. So we're not going to please everybody, because you can never please everybody, but the vast majority are excited about this project.
It's hard not to be excited, Ellen. In addition to helping to create trust, buy-in, and excitement across the broader community, you also did an incredible amount of work to align the key players that make up the design and construction team around the vision. Our research confirms that there was this famous road trip, I understand, in which you loaded up the construction manager, the architect of record, the exhibit designer, and key museum staff for a 7-day, 28-stop tour of the state's major cultural and ecological spots. And are we correct in that?
Yeah, absolutely. It was actually it was in 2020. So we were still in COVID. So we didn't do vans. We actually had a caravan of cars,
Okay.
and we had people from the construction management firm, people from the architects, both the architect of record and the architect who designed, the exhibits team and our own team. And we did 7 days, 28 stops across Wisconsin to, one, see the natural wonders of this state, but also to listen to people. So that was one of those opportunities to listen to people, understand what they understand and what they want to hear. I mean, what they want us to hear. So we did this not only to introduce everybody and kind of level the playing field so we all were on the same page, but this was right at the beginning of the trip, and we wanted everybody, we knew that we'd be making a lot of decisions together, and there'd be hard ones to make. And so we wanted to bring everybody together to bond as a team. And that has really served us well, because we have had lots of hard discussions, and had to make tough decisions most of the time based on costs. And so, but we've had massively creative input in how to address things. So we have challenged our architects and our construction management firm along the way to keep those costs down, but to not change the program for our visitors, to make sure that that's not impacted. And what they've done is amazing, because, you will not see a difference. They may notice the difference, but you will not see a difference. So I think it was a successful trip in that respect, in all respects, actually.
Look at that. So something to add to our toolkit as servant leader practitioners, a good old-fashioned road trip. The last question shifts to, the reality that, as you mentioned earlier at the top of our conversation, leading can be challenging. It's not easy to lead. You've been the glue to holding all the components of this ambitious project together well over 9 years. And I would imagine there have been a lot of ups and downs. Tell our audience, as our servant leader exemplar, what's your source of strength and hope that you might offer to others when faced with obstacles and setbacks to their vision?
The first thing that really comes to mind is having having an amazing team
Mm,
that actually we are all at the table solving the problem. And
mm,
so I think that, when they say hire people smarter than you, that absolutely is what I've done. It's like everybody at that table has such a skill set that, and then it's also bring them together and listen and make sure. I mean, we work so well as a team
mm,
because we will challenge each other all the time. And, people, they all know how I operate. It's like my, I've learned over time, but I still have this where you come to me with something and it's like, oh, I'm not sure if we can do that. And they just plant this seed. And then a day later, I'm coming back saying, maybe we can. So I think they've all learned how I operate, but it's also just being open, having tough discussions, challenging each other, but really being a team and relying on each other. We all cycle through our times when we're stressed because of something going on in our own area, and we all support each other through that stress. And we all come together when we have the big stressors. How are we going to get beyond this? And so I think I have to, this is not, you say I'm the glue that holds us together. I think the team is the glue holding it together. The other thing I will say in terms of, you know, what do I personally do? We started out at the top of the hour with this. It's that natural world. So when things get so stressful, just taking a walk in the woods can really, even if it's 5 below, it can really reset you and, help you to give you the energy to then rise to the challenge. It's just going back to that natural world always reinvigorates me.
Look at that. Nature can always feed us.
That's right.
Uh, Thank you for this portion of our conversation, Ellen. Lots of fun as you promised it would be. It's now my pleasure to turn it over to the center's senior project manager, Gabby Cooper, who will lead us through our Q&A portion of the program. Gabby.
Thank you, Reggie, and thank you, Ellen, for being here with us today. So this first question came in back when where you mentioned like one of the big important things about being in a leadership role is knowing that your decisions affect the people that could be impacted. So the question is, do you have a general approach to managing the tension between speed of decision making and giving a voice to those impacted most significantly?
I would say that I'm one who, if we can hold off on making a decision, we do. Um,
Mhm.
and we've tried really, really we've tried very diligently to listen to the staff. We have a union here, and
Mhm.
I am so grateful to have the union because they we don't always see eye to eye. Clearly, we're not going to, but they continually remind me that this is about people, and they help me to make decisions that that keep them in mind. And that's why I think I think it's a great place to work because we are continually thinking about what's best for the institution, which equals what's best for the people who work here.
Mhm. Wonderful. So our next question comes from one of our center trustees, Catalina, who's on with us today. So she says, "You are such a great servant leader exemplar. Curious to know your view on cultivating philanthropic mindset in the U.S. today and what we can do to ensure future generations continue to upkeep our traditions and history and appreciate the value of giving time and treasure to uplift communities."
So you can imagine we've got a huge capital campaign that we're in the middle of.
Yeah.
And and what we have been doing is bringing on those younger donors to be directly involved in this whole process. And
Mhm.
we when we talk about nature and culture, there's so many aspects to it. And so we can reach out to so many different kinds of people because we have something for everybody in
Yeah.
this museum and something that engages them. So we have been able to engage people that haven't been engaged. And I think the biggest thing about um, any donor, no matter what level, and no matter what age, it's really about that relationship and just building those relationships and those relationships of trust. It's really being honest about what we can and can't do, being focused on that mission. I mean, that mission tells us what we do. And so we don't stray from that mission, we focus. And that's what we keep on talking about is this mission. So we do bring people together of very different backgrounds and they come together around that mission.
Yeah. Relationship building and community building. Yeah. For that shared trust. That's wonderful. So this next question is, with a career spanning nearly 50 years working in museums, how have you seen museums change over time?
Um, well, we just think about the world and how it's changed in the last 50 years. I think about going back even further, I think about my mom who was born in 1918 and lived until 2010. She went through from, telephones and she went through everything.
Hmm.
And now what we're seeing is just everything just speeding up in terms of technology. So, and museums have the they have embraced that technology up to a point. But the real thing that I love about museums is that we go back to the objects, and those are the real things. And so while we use the technology to help us tell the stories around those are the real things that you're coming to see. So
Yeah.
I think the more and more uh, we get into the virtual, the more and more important those real things are. And so I feel like museums, because of that real, will continue to bring people in to see the actual thing. So they've changed, but they haven't. They've always remained focused on their mission. That continues to just like this museum, we've always had the same mission. It's
Yeah.
that it really has always been preserving and protecting the natural and cultural world. And that's what we continue to do.
So it's the ways in which the story and history has told is what has evolved around.
And it's evolved because the world, our knowledge has evolved. And so
Hmm.
that's
Yeah.
why we continue to refresh exhibits and add new. It's because we've generated new information for the world. And
Yeah.
so we want to make sure that everybody has the most recent information.
Of course, of course. So the next question is, do you have an example of a time when a comment or idea from a listening session completely changed the direction of an exhibit or an idea for the new museum?
So I would say I'm not sure that it changed the direction, but there is when we put out a survey and said, how do you when you think of Milwaukee, what word comes to mind? And we got 6,000 responses to this. And the top, which one would think, oh, it's got to be beer or cheese.
Yeah.
It
Hmm.
actually was frozen custard.
Oh, wow.
And which is unique to Wisconsin. We have frozen custard stands, across Wisconsin. Um, and so we said, okay, in the Milwaukee Revealed, we need to have a frozen custard shop. And that is the platform. So we don't have that in the current
Yeah.
museum. That changed, that actually helped us inform us what would be in this exhibit. And but it also became the platform for talking about dairy, the dairy industry in the
Mm,
state, because that's a big part of who we are. And
yeah.
that is resulted in frozen custard. So there are so many of those kinds of of responses that help to shape what we are doing in the museum.
That's a cool story. Yeah. And that's exciting to have the ice cream shop in the museum.
Frozen custard,
The
not
frozen
ice
custard.
cream.
Yeah, I got it. The kids will love that, and adults do.
Yeah.
We have another Greenleaf trustee who's on with us today, Ian, and he asks, do you think your education and experience in natural sciences has helped you develop servant leadership?
I think it probably has because I think once you understand how the world works, you realize you're just part of this whole system
Mm,
and you don't operate outside of it. You operate as part of it. And therefore, as a leader, you're part of a system. You're not operating outside of it. You don't function without everyone else who's operating within this. So I think really understanding the interconnectedness of everything and then even in decisions, how, a decision has so many ramifications down the road. So being able to take that natural world and see how, one little change, they always say the flap of a butterfly wing here, could be felt monumentally somewhere else.
wow.
All those things I think help you to kind of just put yourself in your place, you know,
Mhm.
check your ego.
Yeah, definitely. So, for our last question today, in the interest of time, we have one that was submitted that says, you have held leadership positions at several different institutions across the United States. Drawing from your experience, what advice would you give someone who is about to take their first leadership position?
Um, I would say, so I have a couple of pieces of advice, and one was given to me, and one came through having been a leader. Um,
Okay.
so the one that came through having been a leader is what I said earlier, hire people around you that are smarter than you and
Mhm.
listen to them and let them do their job.
Yeah.
So don't micromanage, they you if you hire smart people, they're gonna make you look really good. Um, and then the second is really check your ego. I said that a minute ago, but it truly is. At one point, I had a dear, dear friend. I was saying I was brand new into a leadership position, and I was saying something. And he said, wow, you better check your ego. And it took me aback, and I thought, and so every time I am where I feel like I'm getting upset about something, I always take a step back and say, okay, is that your ego talking, or is that something to truly be upset about? And I think that that is a huge, that has, I mean, it's always in the back of my mind, check your ego, because it's so easy when you're in a position of leadership to let it really get to your head. And
Mhm.
and that's not good for the organization.
Yeah, I think two pieces of advice that are very timely. Well, thank you so, so much for joining us today. We've had a wonderful time with you. We hope to have you back.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. This was fun.
Yeah.
Great fun. I want to amplify Gabby's appreciation. Ellen, it's been a pleasure to have you with us today. You must come back once you're no longer working to get the museum open. And also, Gabby would have me to say, you've got to remember to include some extra tickets for the Greenleaf people to, just kind of help you usher or whatever we can do just to be present on that grand opening. But certainly the people of Wisconsin are so much better off because of all the work you've been doing to preserve the state's rich history and culture. So thanks so much again. Gabby has some final announcements for us all.
Yes, just a few quick announcements about the center. So, applications for our 2026 Greenleaf Scholars Program are now open. This program funds researchers whose work promotes the efficacy and impact of servant leadership. To learn more about the program and gauge your eligibility, you can visit greenleaf.org, and all information is linked on our homepage. The Greenleaf Center is excited to kick off the year with a Foundations of Servant Leadership course. This course examines the efficacy of a leadership approach that fosters growth in others, builds stronger, vibrant teams, and leads to organizations and communities better than the way they were found. So there are just a few days to register for our class that begins next Tuesday, February 2nd. You can visit greenleaf.org for information and registration that's linked to the homepage. And lastly, we'd like to invite you to our upcoming Women's History Month webinar celebration on March 24th, featuring women trailblazers in government. We'll be announcing our panel soon, so you won't want to miss it. You can register through the QR code on the screen here. And if you would like to stay connected with the Greenleaf Centers, we have LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram platforms where all of our events, such as these webinars and foundations courses, are kept up to date. So you can follow us on these platforms. And then lastly, thank you to everybody who joined us today. If you could take a brief moment to complete the Zoom survey that pops up after the webinar closes, we would greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much and take care, everybody.